Okay, everyone needs jobs, and it's not just charismatic people. Charismatic people have a much easier time forming relationships with strangers, but I'm not naturally charismatic. I was in business school, though, and I needed to make relationships with people to instill them with trust that I could be a good employee one day. So opting out of forming relationships is not an option. You need to have a framework or a diagnostic that works for you that helps build trust in people systematically in your abilities. I'm sort of like the Tin Man, I don't really have a heart, so having algorithms to follow takes a lot of the anxiety out of meeting new people for me. Having a list of questions that I can run people through. So I'm going to show you my list of questions. It's called the TIARA framework. Important thing to note about informational meetings and the job search in general is that likability trumps knowledge. There are plenty of knowledgeable people out there, plenty who are more knowledgeable than you, but not all of them are likable. And finding a likable, knowledgeable person is really, really challenging. You can't really change your level of knowledge at this very moment. You can't change your past work experience. You can't be a candidate that had that job before somewhere else when you're looking for a new job. But you can predictably make yourself more likable to contacts at your target organizations. And it doesn't involve any salesmanship. You don't have to be a good natural salesman. Not many of us are natural salesmen. If you've ever seen someone try to sell who's not a natural salesman, it's really painful to watch. So don't think that you need to be a salesman in this process. You can build likability systematically simply by asking questions and being genuinely curious. And that's what I'm going to walk you through right now. The informational meeting, it's important to understand the structure. There's three basic parts of it. There's small talk at the beginning, there's a Q&A period at the end, or in the middle, and then there's next steps at the end. So let's talk about each one of those. For small talk, the whole meeting will take about 30 minutes. For small talk, I have a good amount of discussion. I've had to cut this for time, but there's a good amount of discussion in the book, The 2-Hour Job Search, about the right amount of research for an informational meeting. I recommend 15 minutes, but there are 3 questions that it's critical you're able to answer before you go into an informational. And those 3 are: tell me about yourself, why are you interested in our company, why are you interested in this industry or this particular function. But my book goes through how to answer those effectively. And in the book, you'll learn my 3-question algorithm for initiating small talk if it doesn't come naturally to you. And their questions is simple. The first one I would teach you to use is, how's your day going so far? Because that one gives you a temperature check and tells you, is this person going to be all business or are they chatty? If they're chatty, they're going to give you some extraneous information that you can use as a follow-up question concept. And that's how small talk can happen. But much more detailed discussion in the book when you pick that up. The Q&A portion is called, that's where the TIARA framework gets its name. That's another acronym. The theory behind it is that you're going to start off framing your contact as an expert, and then you're going to convert them over the course of the conversation to being a mentor. The reason for this is you don't want to make your first question, what should I do right now to maximize my chance of getting an interview with your company? Your contact doesn't know if they like you yet or not, and they're not thinking that creatively. You haven't primed them to think creatively yet. So they may just say something non-committal, like, oh, keep doing what you're doing and you'll be fine. So we want to prime them to think creatively, and the easiest way to do that is by framing them as an expert before we ask them questions as if they were our mentor, which is the goal. We want to convert them to being a mentor, but we need to frame them as an expert first. So T is for trends, and I'll just give you one sample question from each. In the book, there are a number of sample questions. You may only need one question per topic here, but you can find one that works best for you. But a sample trend question would be, what trends are most impacting your business right now? Then we get a little bit more personal. Instead of asking them about the market in large, we ask them about them personally. What's been your biggest aha moment on the job that made your job easier for you? Then we start to convert them to being a mentor. We've built up some goodwill. Everybody likes answering questions about why they're so good at their jobs. And you don't risk playing Stump the Recruiter, where you ask them a detailed question that they can't answer. Because if you've ever done that, they're not going to blame you, or they're not going to blame themselves for lack of knowledge. They're going to blame you for asking an inappropriate question, even if it's something they should have known. It's a concept from behavioral science called the fundamental attribution error. Google it. It's a really powerful concept. When things go right, we blame ourselves. We congratulate ourselves. When things go poorly, we blame other people. So advice is the third category. If you were me, what would you be doing right now to best prepare for a career in this field? That's the kind of question you want to ask here. So we're converting them to a mentor by directly asking for empathy. We're not just asking them for general advice. We're asking them to imagine you were me. What would you do if you were me? That's a much different question and warrants a better level of quality answer. Resources, this is the pivot of the conversation, is the first resource question. So what resources do you recommend I investigate next? Ideally, they give you a contact. If they give you a contact, there's one way to close the conversation that I discussed in the book. Again, we don't have time to discuss it here. But not a lot of people are ready to give you a contact until they check with their contact that that's okay. So we want to ask that question in a non-committal fashion. So what resources do you recommend I look into next? If they give you a person's name, that's great, victory. If they don't give you a person's name and they instead ask what sort of information you're looking for, then I want you to ask about actual resources. What magazines do you read? What websites do you check regularly? What's the most important 10 minutes of research that you do in a given day to stay current? Stuff that will help you get smarter by proxy in your field of interest. But you don't want to put a contact on the spot for a contact. If they don't offer one when you ask for resources, they're probably not open to it. You want to reserve the right to ask them for contacts in your follow-up, which is what you will do. The final category is assignments. What project have you done that you think have been particularly impactful? Again, there are more questions from each of these categories in the book, so I highly recommend checking that out if you're looking for something more. And then you want to close with next steps. If they give you a contact, you'll say, thank you, I'll follow up with you in a couple weeks to let you know what happens. If they don't give you a contact, you'll say, you've given me a lot to think about. Is it okay if I reach out to you, ask further questions? They'll say yes, and you'll reach back out to ask further questions, including whether they can refer you to somebody else. Really, the point of the informational meeting, you're always going to be asking questions that are both flattering to your contact and they're fun to answer. They're not questions that people get wrong. That's where you want to be for your informational meetings. You can ask 10 different people what trends they're seeing that are most impactful in their business, and you'll get 10 different answers. They're very durable as well. So our takeaways from this final third step of the process of recruiting advocacy: focus on likability, don't focus on selling. Not many people can sell, and nobody likes being sold to. People put their guard up when they sense they're being sold to. Building likability is much more predictable, and anyone can do it regardless of your existing charisma level, or even if you're not comfortable around people, you can still build likability by asking questions. So it's predictable and it's more effective at getting people on your side. Second, the TIARA framework can be a starting point. You can plan on going into an informational meeting and following it exactly to a T, or it can be a fallback on short notice. If you find yourself at a lunch table with somebody who works for an employer you've never even heard of or considered before, TIARA doesn't require that much advanced research. It's good to do that research if you have the opportunity, but if you're ever put on the spot, I've used TIARA at wedding reception tables when I've been sat with a bunch of strangers and nobody wanted to talk. It's incredibly durable because everybody seems to enjoy talking about their work. So it will be good as a fallback, or it will be good as a first option. Most importantly, check back in systematically to extract the maximum benefit from your informationals. You're not going to get the full benefit of your informationals in that first meeting. Once you get that referral from a contact, or once they say they don't know how else to help you, but they've given you some advice to go run with, set a monthly reminder for that contact to give them courtesy updates to let them know where you stand. If they gave you advice, recap that advice, let them know how you benefited from that advice, and then ask them for more advice. That's how you deepen the relationship. It uses a concept called the Ben Franklin effect, which I recommend you Google. It's also discussed in the book. But over time, people are suddenly, things that they were screening out because they don't need an entry-level job, they've already got a job. They're screening that information out because they didn't know of any relevant candidates. Once they meet you and like you, suddenly that information becomes relevant to them. So when they hear it in the future, they'll register it. But you need to go back and prime them to let them know you're still out there looking, because they're not always going to feed that posting to you proactively. The output of this step is a referral, and referrals are the only predictable way to get interviews. No matter how many resumes you send on online job postings or how many hours you spend doing it, there's no guarantee any of them will turn to an interview. But I can guarantee you the more referrals you have, the more interviews you will get. It's just there's no guaranteed time frame for that happening.